And so then Brian gently pulled me away, and then he took me aside and was showing me how he flies. I know it might sound crazy, but it's like all of a sudden, it's like the sky was above me and the ground was below me, and everything was kind of turning, and it was beautiful. And there were dark purple clouds and little specks of white everywhere, which I understood was other spirit. And then I understood that he was teaching me kind of how he flies, and that this is how amazing it is here. And he told me that he said, remember the movement. There's freedom in the movement. This is why I don't want to leave. This is why I want to stay.
Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. And tonight we have a special guest, Paige W. Lee. So Paige is a dynamic speaker, certified grief and transformation coach, Reiki practitioner. As a former Helping Parents Heal affiliate director, she now serves as a caring listener for the organization. She lives with her husband, Dwayne, on a small acreage near Boise, Idaho, where she puts her passion for nature and gardening to good use. They love to travel and spend as much time as they can with their 2 remaining children and 5 grandchildren. So she is the author of Choose to Believe, a story of miracles, healing, and the afterlife, involving the passing of her son. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is her experiences related to what we talk about in this channel, which is life after death. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it to Paige. Paige, how are you doing?
Hi, Cyrus. I'm great. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, it's great to have you. So as you know, something we talk a lot about on this show is losing a loved one, losing a child. We've had actually numerous guests at this point, either in or affiliated with Helping Parents Heal. And I always say that it's the parents of children who have transitioned, who may be the cornerstone of getting afterlife information out to the public. They tend to be some of the most motivated people that I've met in this field. And with that said, I kind of want to turn it over to you, Paige, so you can tell us a bit about your book and really maybe your story starting from the beginning, and then we'll go from there. Is that okay?
That sounds great. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for that really nice introduction. And it's really wonderful to be here with you and your tribe of people, some of which I know, and that I have followed you as well, Cyrus, over the years in your adventures in the afterlife. So I look up to you as somebody who has a lot of knowledge. And so thank you for doing what you do as well. So yeah, my son, Brian, was my only living child. He was born in 1985, and he was my only child because I lost his sister, who, when I was 6 months pregnant with his sister Jamie, she died in the womb. And then several years after that, I had a couple miscarriages. So Brian was really kind of my miracle baby. It was a perfect pregnancy. We had no issues with the pregnancy at all. He was born a healthy child, 3 weeks late. He didn't want to come out, but when he did, he was full steam ahead. And that kid was, he was just off and running, from the minute he was born. And he was my pride and joy. He was my only. And everything I did in life was for him and about him. And when he was old enough to leave the house and venture out on his own, it was just everything we did was, when can we see him again? And we would travel to him, or he would travel to us. And all of you with children, right, how hard it is when your children leave the nest, and you just miss them so much. But at the same time, you want to let them spread their wings and grow and, become the person that they, are really on this earth to become. So he was a pretty amazing kid. He was funny, he was smart, he was a tremendous athlete. He grew up in the town where we live and went to junior high and high school here. He played football and basketball and baseball. Lacrosse and football were his favorite sports. He was a wrestler when he was in junior high school, when I lived in Boise, actually. And because now we're in a little farming community outside of Boise called Eagle, Idaho. And anyhow, so he was just one of those kids, right? He was smart, he was popular, he was funny, he was, good looking. And so you never expect that something bad's going to happen. as any parent whose child has died will tell you, you hear about these tragic stories on the news, and it's just always somebody else's kid, right? You never in a million years dream that it's going to be your kid. And this time it was our kid. And so what happened is Brian had actually been a West Point cadet. He always wanted to be an Ivy League, he wanted to be in an Ivy League school, and we couldn't afford that. And so he decided, well, I'll join the military. I can serve my country and get an Ivy League education. So he applied for some military appointments in academies, and he received, I think, 3 to West Point, 2 to the Air Force Academy, and 1 to the Naval Academy. So, I mean, not just 1, he got 6 or 5, whatever that is. And he chose West Point. So he went to West Point for 1.5 years and made the dean's list and did really well, but did not like the military life. And so he transferred out with honors and ended up at USC in California, University of Southern California. And he finished his economics degree there and decided he wanted to be a filmmaker. He had discovered a passion for film while he was there. And then so he signed up to get a second degree in filmmaking. And he was just started his last semester of that degree, okay, when this happened. And it was September 17th, he called me and we had a really nice, lovely, long conversation on the phone. And I had been sick all day and my stomach hurt and I had a headache. And I was like, babe, just, because I'd been like, what are you doing tonight? And he said, oh, I'm going to go out and have a beer. And I said, don't go, just stay home, right? It's late, why would you want to go out this late? Like, college kids, that's what they do, is go out late. But I think in retrospect, I had a feeling maybe that something bad was going to happen. But he said, oh, I'll be fine. And said, I love you, and hang up, right? And then the next morning at 5 a.m., you get that phone call and you're instantly awake. And it was his roommate saying, something's happened. Brian's been in a fight. I don't know what happened, but I'm at the hospital. They won't tell me anything. I need you to find out what's going on. And so I called the hospital, and they wouldn't tell me a thing because Brian was an adult, and even as his mother, I had no rights to know what was going on. So they wouldn't tell me anything, and it was just agonizing, absolutely agonizing. And waiting and just praying and praying and praying. And I remember I was sitting in my living room in my husband's recliner, just like with my phone clenched in my hand, and just like I didn't know what to do. I was just waiting for somebody to call me back. And finally my phone did ring, and it was the VP of Student Affairs at USC. And I'm like, hello. And he's, hello, is this Paige Lee? And I said, yes. And he said, well, I'm calling about your son, Brian. And I said, well, I know, I was talking to the hospital. And he said, oh, so your son has passed away. And I just like, whew, even as I say those words to you now, I'm just like, whew, it's just like this energy runs through my body, even now, 12 years later. And I was like, because of course I had not known that. And that's exactly how he said it. Oh, so your son has passed away. And I just started screaming and dropped my phone. And I was, I'm just screaming. What do you do? I completely fell apart. And, it's almost like before my eyes, my entire world just shattered. So here's what happened. And then of course we went to LA. We hopped on a plane with Brian's dad. We're divorced, and his wife, and we went to LA to figure out what was going on. So that's all in the book. I won't tell you about all that, but what happened was the night before, Brian had indeed found a friend to go out and have a beer with him. And that friend had found another friend. So there were the 3 boys, and these are good kids, and they do drink, but they weren't drunk. They weren't falling over. They weren't disturbing the peace particularly, other than I'm sure they were being a little loud. But they had left the bar and they were walking home. And this was a new apartment, right? New semester, new apartment. They'd only been there about 3 weeks. And they took a wrong turn and they missed their turn. And so they had to backtrack. It's like fate, right? Like, oh, if only they hadn't missed their turn, or if only he hadn't gone out that night. But, you can't play those games. You just can't, because honestly, it is what it is, and it happened. And, you have to find a way to live with that. So, so the kids backtracked, and in the process of that, they turned on a different street to kind of get them back the direction they needed to go. And keeping in mind that this campus is, they were just off campus, right? So they were just, downtown LA, just off campus. And the apartment was, I think, also just off campus. And anyhow, they walked by an apartment building. There was a gate and a fence, and a wrought iron fence and a gate in front of the apartment building, and the gate was open. And Brian reached over and slammed it shut. And that was the wrong thing to do. A man came out yelling and screaming, and why did you slam my gate? And they got in a fight. The man struck first, and they got in a fight, and Brian was defending himself. They ended up on the ground. Brian ended up on top of the man, like, dude, like, are you done? And got up and walked away. And he and his friends got to the corner. When they were detained verbally by the guy's girlfriend, the guy ran into his mother's apartment, who was the one that lived there, ran back out, ran up to Brian with one final punch, which later, we found out was a knife, and just one stab. And the boys are like, what, Brian was like, whatever, dude, just let us go. And they turned to cross the street, and he just collapsed. And we found out later that he died in the ambulance. So that's the story. That's what happened. And my book tells that story in a little more detail, and then kind of the what transpired when we got to LA and our time there, and then the burial, right? Because the burial is such a huge. It's funny, as a griever, any griever, no matter who your loved one is, who you've lost, but particularly, I think, a parent, I just don't remember hardly anything. And thank God, I journaled everything in those early days. I journaled everything for the first year and a half, 2 years. I know, Sunday, you and I have talked about journaling and how important it is to help us kind of remember the events, so that we can, honestly, in my opinion, we can clear them, right? Clear them and release them, so that they don't just continue to haunt us, right? And anyhow, so I had that. I had all those details, because 12 years later, I'm telling you, there's no way I would have remembered, what time or what day. And so those are the first 2 chapters of the book.
Okay, and so I know you've had, since his passing, you've told me you've had a couple of clairaudient experiences. You've had different forms of communication with him since he's passed. So can you sort of walk us through that and how that started, and what some of those communications have consisted of?
Absolutely. It's my favorite thing to talk about. So, and that's what my book is about. My book is not about Brian's death. It is about the healing journey that I went on with him, between then and now. So for a 12-year time frame. And it all began 3 weeks after he died, just 3 weeks after he died. And I was laying on my bed, awake, eyes were open, I was awake, and I heard out loud with my ears. This is not something I heard in my head, which is how I usually hear spirit. I heard it out loud with my ears, "Mom!" And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I jumped up. I literally jumped up, and I'm like, "Brian, where are you? Where are you?" And it was that moment 3 weeks after he died that I knew. I mean, for somebody who, I have no religious background really to speak of, I didn't have any particular belief or thoughts about the afterlife. I just kind of believed that we went to heaven, and, better be good so we don't go to hell, which I don't believe in hell now, but that's another thing. But in any event, "Mom," out loud. And so I went on a mission to find him, and I found him.
Okay, so there was the clairaudient experience where he calls out "Mom." So can you tell us more about other experiences you've had, what you've learned, and how that's all shaped up? And one quick note, your microphone, you might be touching or hitting your microphone sometimes with your left hand. So I don't know where your microphone is on your desk, but I just want to let you know that sometimes we're getting the audio blips coming in.
I'll keep my hand still. My camera, my microphone's just on my computer. I don't have a separate one. So, okay. So yes. So Brian has been very present since that first day when he called out to me with the clairaudience. He's been very present in my life. And I think really it is our mission and our purpose to work together to help other people, especially parents, understand that their relationship with their child or their loved one does not have to end. And so Brian has been very patient with me as I navigated my way through this new kind of understanding about spirituality, about the afterlife, and accepting the fact that the messages, the signs, the feelings, the whatever it is that he's using to send to me, that it really is him. Because it took me years to have full, complete faith that it was him, that I wasn't making it up. And I'll share with you some of the ways that he does communicate with me. The first thing he did after the clairaudient experience, other than guiding me, right? So spirit guides us to kind of the next step on the journey, right? So we need to be aware all the time about, the messages that the universe is sending to us and the opportunities that are coming our way, because it'll be up to us to choose. Oh, I'm going to take advantage of that. I'm jumping on board to that, or no, I'm not going to. So we have to have eyes open and ears open and hearts open all the time to be able to see and understand, there's an opportunity. I can take that if I want, and I can, continue my expansion and my growth in this area. And so I became very conscious of that. I learned more and more about that. And that opened up my willingness to be open to these things, opened up Brian in my life in a much stronger way, right? And in a much more real way. So I had the fortune of finding a medium just a couple of months, 3 months after Brian died. And that man launched me into psychic development classes and things like that, where I was really learning how to open my intuition. And then I started seeing signs that Brian was around us, like our iPod, back in the day we had iPod and a speaker, right, back then. And it would just start playing all by itself. And the TV would blink on and blink off all by itself. And I'd get in my car and I'd turn on the radio and Brian's favorite songs. We love Led Zeppelin. That's our jam, right? And the favorite Led Zeppelin would always be on the radio every time I turned it on, even if I wasn't listening to a classic rock band station, right? So things like that. That's how it started. And then one day I was out in my garden and I was pulling weeds and pruning flowers. I do flower gardening, not vegetables. Sadly, I should do vegetables, but I don't. And I just felt a presence. It was so strong. And it was the first time I think I'd really, really felt spirit next to me. And I'm like, whoa, who is that? And I'm looking around for my husband, my neighbor, nobody's there. And so I said, Mom, is that you? My mom had passed away in 2002. I'm like, Mom, is that you? If that's you, send me a yellow butterfly. And no butterfly appears. And I said, Brian, is that you? Send me a ladybug. And of course, no ladybug appears. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I was like, I don't know what that was about. And then I felt this calmness come over me with the words, you've asked for this miracle, it shall be done. And I'm like, okay. So, you go throughout your day, you forget all about that experience. I absolutely had not remembered it, had not told my husband about it. And that night, the kids had come over, my 2 stepchildren, and we were celebrating my birthday. It was my 50th birthday. This is just the first summer after Brian died, okay? So maybe 10 months after he died.
Paige, I thought you were like 45.
Yeah.
Like right now. Anyway, keep going.
Actually, I just turned 61 this summer, but thank you for that. I like you even more. So anyhow, and I was cooking dinner and I walked by, we have this bay window area, and there on the windowsill is a ladybug. Like, seriously, I've never had a ladybug in my house before then. We'd lived here for 11 years. Not one time had I seen a ladybug. And yet the very day that I asked my son, send me a ladybug if that was you, and a ladybug appears in my home. And I just started jumping up and down and screaming. I think my family all thought I was having another panic attack, which I had frequently and regularly, after he died. And that was the beginning of our ladybug tradition. I mean, we get them all the time, you guys, all the time. We get them at every time there's an important family event. It's just, we were on a cruise ship in Alaska a couple of years ago. We were up on the very top deck on a very cold day in Glacier Bay, Alaska. Okay. And we had rented a little booth thing where we could, have some cocktails and food delivered to us while we watched the glaciers. And I looked down, and there on the deck is a ladybug in the middle of Glacier Bay, Alaska in September. And it was probably, 40 degrees outside. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It was amazing. And my book tells other ladybug stories that are phenomenal. So that was really the first way that Brian started to send me the knowledge that he was near. And I've had amazing, when he really wants to get my attention, he sends me what I call the Brian hug. And the Brian hug really is a physical manifestation, because I call them kind of spiritual tingles sometimes, but when I know it's Brian, I call it the Brian hug. And it starts at my crown, and all the way through my entire body, I start tingling. And it's almost like I start tingling, and then it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And the last couple times it's happened, I've had to like drop what I was doing, because it's like so strong I can hardly stand, right? So I have to like consciously, and as a Reiki certified person, I have to like work to like move that energy through me, because it's so intense. So that's what I call my Brian hugs. He sends me those occasionally, not all the time, but maybe 5 or 6 a year.
So what would you say to somebody who maybe they've lost a child, but they're kind of stuck in a level of skepticism, where if they saw a ladybug on a ship in Alaska in September, they'll just keep dismissing it, like, well, I can't, that there's nothing supernatural there. It's not a sign. It's not a sign. Is there a way to, any advice to give to somebody who maybe they lost somebody, but they're dismissing signs, or they're not looking directly at them, or they're not recognizing them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think, and it's such a beautiful segue. Do you mind if I do a blatant self-promotion here and show you my book?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is my book, Choose to Believe. And it's a quick read, because as grievers, we can't concentrate on anything for very long, right? So it's a bunch of short chapters, and it's all about that. Cyrus, you nailed it. That's exactly what this book is about, is how to trust and have faith that your loved one, your child, your parent, your spouse, your sibling, your friend, to trust that they do still live. They aren't in physical form anymore, but they still live, and you can still have a relationship with them, and they are trying hard to communicate with you. So that's absolutely 1,000% what my book is about. It's not about the sadness and the pain. It's about the healing and the joy that we can have in our lives again, that we can find that, and then pass it on to other people, right? You mentioned that you've had a lot of Helping Parents Heal people on the show. And it's important that we do that. We have to share so that the others will know, right? Because a lot of people don't know. So my advice in the book is to establish with your loved ones what it is that you would like them to communicate, first of all, so that you know what you're looking for, but always be open to all possibilities. But here's what happened to me, because even though I was getting the ladybugs, and I had some amazing meditations that we haven't talked about yet, because I really do find my loved ones in meditation. I have not gone as far as astral travel, except for maybe one time that I'll share with you if we have time. But what happened is I was still doubting, right? So years into my grief journey, and I was getting all this cool stuff, and I was getting signs and signals and, my Brian hugs, but still, sometimes I'd be like, oh, I don't know, I'm just making it up, or I'm going crazy, or like, oh my, I think I'm going crazy. Nobody's going to believe me. And then in meditation one day, I heard Spirit say, just choose to believe. Just choose to believe it's true. Choose to believe that it's real. And that's why the name of my book is Choose to Believe. Because from that moment on, I just said, I can do that. I can choose to believe that it's real every time, even though it's probably not always him, right? Sometimes it's not him, but I'm just going to choose to believe. And then after an amount of time, I found that I wasn't choosing to believe anymore. I really did believe. So it's a conscious healing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Grief is so hard. It sucks so bad. And you have to make a conscious decision every day to heal. You have to make a conscious decision every day to choose to believe, and to stay on that pathway. For me, the choice to choose to believe that Brian was still alive, the choice to choose to believe that the ladybugs were from him and the Brian hugs are from him, and the opportunities that were set my way were from him or from my God or from my spirit team. Choosing to believe those things made it real, and then opportunities just kept opening up more and more. So the old adage of give to the universe, tell the universe what you want and that's what you will receive.
Well, what I like to say to people as well is that, in effect, a lot of things in life are beliefs, because there's the Western mindset that, quote, beliefs are for sissies. So one analogy I like to use, though, is the moon landing, because, you have some people who believe the moon landing is fake. I don't believe that. There you go with belief. But believing that the moon landing did happen is nonetheless a belief that, for example, mission control, where they were not duping everybody, that the astronauts were telling the truth, that there really was a space shuttle, that you really did land on the moon. So it's basically a chain of events that happened, which you can historically look at and say, I'm not going to believe that it's fake. I'm going to believe that it really happened. Or maybe you want to say, I believe it's fake. It didn't happen. Either way, it's an event that happened, but its reality in your life depends on your belief. Now, sometimes we don't think that these basic things really are beliefs, but I often say that they are beliefs, because you don't have an objective, tangible way to experience that necessarily. And so you have to make a decision. Did this really happen or did it not happen? So the trap that a lot of people in this area, people kind of on the fence, they fall into, is they decide that they're not going to accept anything into their reality unless it passes 10, 20, 30, 100 security protocols inside their mind, until they can finally say, okay, now it's passed enough criteria. But people, typically, we don't put nearly as many criteria on things that we take for granted that we believe are real, that really happen. Do you believe black holes exist? Why not? You've never seen one. You haven't experienced one, but you trust the scientists who say that it happens. So it shouldn't be so difficult to accept an afterlife when real experiences happen that are outside of the realm of coincidence. Those are just some of my thoughts about that. Paige, I might have muted you there for a second because we're getting some audio troubles, but you can unmute down on the by clicking the mute button. I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, that's okay. No, thank you for that. And I agree with you 1,000%. And there's, in the book, I have these little, at the end of every chapter, there's these little spirit messages that, are messages that were channeled through me, or in a couple of cases, other people, that kind of summarize the chapter that you just read, right? And one of those little spirit messages is almost exactly what you just said. It's like, I don't know what your feelings about God are, but in the just believe, choose to believe. Do you believe in your God? Yet can you see your God? Do you believe in, gravity? Yet can you see gravity? I mean, it's right. You have to believe. And
it is possible to believe incorrect things. And we see that in the modern age. We see that with certain branches of conspiracy movements. We see that with certain people. I don't know, flat earth could be an example of something like that, And, but I also think people need to let their intuition guide them a bit, so that that what you are believing is attuned to objective reality. And usually we can feel that. So there was a time when I was maybe 50-50 on the afterlife, right? Many years ago, I wasn't a committed advocate, I guess, of an afterlife. But during that time, I definitely felt like an intuitive sense that the materialism that we're told by the media, that we're told by society, that's what our our denomination has to be, that there's no such thing as anything outside of the brain. Brain equals consciousness. I had a strong intuitive feeling that this was wrong, and that helped guide me in learning more about an afterlife. So I do think we need to use intuition as well. Paige, I did have to mute you again because we were getting more of those. The microphone might be causing you some troubles, but So you'll have to unmute again to talk. So those are just some of my thoughts about that. So I'm going to turn it back to you and see if you had any more thoughts about that or anything else from the book that you want to talk about. And I also want to get to, I know you've had some experiences since then that maybe are not in the book. So I want to touch on those real quick as well. So I'll turn it back to you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I guess what I want to say is that meditation for me has been a very key method for communicating with my son and my dad too. Actually, my dad passed in 2012, which was pretty difficult. But I had one meditation in particular that I want to tell you about. I would not have called it an out-of-body experience, but I think it was. So I'm going to tell you about it. It was pretty spectacular. So I was actually at a conference in Phoenix a number of years back, and let's see, I think it was the Helping Parents Heal Conference actually in Phoenix 3 years ago or so. And I had attended a workshop, and the workshop was a kind of a group meditation, and there were probably, I don't even know, 100 or more people in the room. So you don't expect anything to happen, right? But I immediately, and it was a guided meditation by the facilitator, who I think was, I'm not sure, I think it was Mark Pitstick, but in any event, I immediately went under, right? Almost like a hypnotic type stance. And I immediately was transported, and I was transported into a garden, and there were ladybugs everywhere, little ladybugs on the flowers, and the flowers were huge, and the colors were like, I've never seen a garden so beautiful. And then there were these huge ladybugs flying through the air. It was just so cool and so amazing. And then I saw my son, and he looked as he did, you know, when I knew him here on this earth, and he was there, and then my mom was there, and my dad was there, and my grandparents were there, and they kind of joined together, and they were all kind of, I don't know if they probably holding hands, but to me, they were just kind of holding their arms out with one another, and they started showering me with their love and pouring their love into me. And you guys, I'm not kidding you, I have never felt intensity of any feeling, but love in particular, in my body, in my physical body, as I did that day. And they just kept pouring and pouring and pouring. And it's like they all joined together as one, and they were shooting this love through me and around me and in me and, you know, above me and below me. It was everywhere. And and in the conference room, I was kind of dimly aware that I was still there, tears were streaming down my face. I was with a group of people who were all kind of like watching me like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And I'm just like sobbing in the conference room, but in this other place, I'm receiving and accepting all their love. And then it got to be too much to bear. My stomach started to hurt, you know, physically I was having trouble receiving any more of it. And so then Brian gently pulled me away, and then he took me aside and was showing me how he flies. I know it might sound crazy, but it's like all of a sudden, it's like the sky was above me and the ground was below me, and everything was kind of turning, and it was beautiful, and there were dark purple clouds and little specks of white everywhere, which I understood was other spirit. And then I understood that he was teaching me kind of how he flies, and that this is how amazing it is here. And he told me that, he said, remember the movement. There's freedom in the movement. This is why I don't want to leave. This is why I want to stay. And then he guided me back to say goodbye to my loved ones. And I came back, you know, kind of into my body, so to speak, and woke up. And it was the most amazing experience. I've never had anything quite like it before or after. Although I have had many connections with him in meditation.
The key point that this was a real astral trip is also that your consciousness was taken someplace else. In the sense, you lost consciousness and you were appearing on that side. It wasn't a visualization. It was you know, like you said, a hypnotic trance. So you were out, and then your consciousness was projected to that side, which is what astral projection is. And it almost felt like, from what you just told me, like it was something that was facilitated or pre-planned by them. They're like, okay, we got to have the butterfly. I mean, the ladybugs there, and we got to make sure everyone's around her, and to be able to schedule this so that we're all there, so she can have this experience. And so it is really great. And so it's a good point also for people who want to have an astral experience and are really banking and hoping that's going to happen to them. Well, don't give up hope. And sometimes it may also require facilitation by somebody else to help bring somebody into that state. I think that can be a special trigger that can happen for some of us to be able to initiate an experience like that if it's more difficult to do it on your own. With that said, Paige, I think something else happened to you recently that you mentioned you wanted to talk about before we wrap up. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, if you think it's appropriate, it was a number of years ago, and it doesn't involve my son.
That's fine. I have no problems like switching around topics. So, so something interesting happened to you that may not involve the current thread of conversation, but it's related to the afterlife or the paranormal. So we'll discuss that here for a minute. So what happened?
Good. So I definitely would put this in the paranormal category, and I'll preface it by saying, I don't know if I believe in ghosts. Like, before Brian died, I probably would have said, oh, there's ghosts, but I don't even know how I feel about that. So don't ask me, because I believe in spirit, right? I believe in spirit. I believe in afterlife, the things that we've discussed. But I was in Phoenix. I was at another conference, and with my core group of ladies that travel with me all over, doing a conference every year, that their children have also died. And there's a medium who was speaking at the conference, who we had been blessed to come to know. And he was going to do a day trip into Portland. Actually, this was in Portland. And he was going to do a day trip, and did we all want to go? And we're like, sure. Well, I was exhausted. I had not slept the night before. And I was like, I'm not going to go. I'm going to go. I'm not going to go. I was all over the board, right? But I didn't, I had FOMO. I didn't want to miss out on any fun. And I wanted to be with the party. So I said, oh, I'm just going to go. I'm going to go change, and I'm going to go. So I get in the elevator, and my room is on the 3rd floor, and the elevator's on the main floor. And I get in the elevator, and I'm like, you guys, I'll be right back. I just have to go change. There's nobody else in the elevator. I get in, I push 3 for the 3rd floor, and the doors close. And the elevator starts to go up, and then all of a sudden starts to go down really fast. And I heard a voice out loud again with my ears. That's the second time I've had the clairaudient experience. And the voice said, get out. Like, just like that, just like that, get out.
Oh,
and
geez.
I'm like freaked out. It was a woman's voice in my mind. And I absolutely totally freaked out. And the elevator, it was going pretty quickly. It only went to the basement. It was only 1 floor, but it felt like an eternity. And the doors opened all by themselves. And I could not run out of that elevator fast enough, and almost ran into a gentleman who was waiting to get the elevator. And I'm like, don't get on that elevator, whatever you do. Well, guys, here's what happened. So eventually he led me to my friends. I wouldn't get back on the elevator. So he took me around and up the stairs and to my friends in the lobby. And they're like, oh my gosh. So 2 of them stayed back with me, and the rest of the group went, right, with this medium. And they get there to downtown Portland, and they get out of their cab or whatever they were riding in, and they start walking, and they cross the street. And right before they crossed the street, there was a woman who was standing on the corner, and a bus came up and smacked her and killed her.
Jeez.
I know. I'm like, this poor woman. I mean, my heart just breaks for her. So, but here's what's interesting. The medium was there to immediately go to her side and help guide her spirit home, right? Which is what he did. My friends gathered around in prayer, right, for her, and we didn't know what was happening. I was still back at the hotel, just kind of freaking out. So we've always wondered, had I gone, had I not listened to that voice in the elevator, had I gotten, had I gone with them, and would I have been the one that was killed? Or would I have not been able to handle the intensity of the experience? I mean, we don't know, but clearly I was not supposed to go on that trip.
Well, that's an interesting perspective, because at first I was thinking, oh, this how unfortunate there's this earthbound soul in this elevator, and it's very sad. But actually, it's being spun a different way now, that actually might have been something from the other side cueing you to save you from a situation like that, in some way or another. So it might not always be what people first think that something is, right? So your first instinct is, ooh, a ghost, but it might not be. It's something I debate with also in people on the forum sometimes, because they think that any kind of contact from beyond, unless it's extremely twinkly and feel good, it's got to be a ghost or a specter or a creature living on that side, earthbound. But I always say that that's not necessarily the case. It's actually our own fear that may interpret things that way. We can't always expect everything to be sugar-coated. You might be a spirit encounter where they're trying to urgently tell you something, but it doesn't mean that it's some evil creature trying to get you. And some people really have that. Some people, they'll call a priest the medium to send Uncle Bob to the light because Uncle Bob left a feather on the counter. Some people really take that to an extreme, and I always encourage people not to do that. It's a contact from beyond. It's not some evil spirit out to get you. But anyway, thanks for sharing that. It's interesting. And yeah, it definitely is a strange, unfortunate series of events that also happened. Lady getting killed like that at the event. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead though and turn it over to the patrons listening to be able to ask you questions if they have any. Before we get to that, though, I will mention that if you're watching this on YouTube, this is Afterlife Topics Metaphysics. If you want to support this work, get involved, become a patron yourself, and participate in guest interviews or unlimited coaching with me. If you want help with astral projection or whatever it might be, you can sign up as a patron at afterlifetopics.com/university. There's also the Patreon page. Patreon has a few more taxes and fees sometimes than PayPal, but there's that option as well if you want to get involved. Also, you can just join the Facebook group, get involved in the comments down below, subscribe to the channel. All that, of course, is free for anyone. And also pick up just books like Understanding Life After Death, The Afterlife and Beyond on Amazon as well. Of course, Paige's book, which I'll have a link to that in the description down below on the YouTube info. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the patrons to see if anyone has a question, but I will turn to Sunday first because she used the little hand-raising tool on Zoom. So hey, Sunday, how's it going?
Hey, thanks, Cyrus. Paige, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that experience, well, the experiences that you've had with your son. The question I had is that amazing meditation that you talked about. Did you feel like when you were there that you also knew that you were still sitting in a chair somewhere, but you felt fully present and you were fully conscious, and that felt like a real environment?
Hi, Sunday. Thank you for your question. Yes, absolutely. It was like this little part of my left brain. I'm going to say that because it was actually coming from the left side of my brain. This little part was very conscious. It's almost like I had an eye and I could see myself sitting in the chair, and I could see that I was sobbing, and I could feel that when my tummy started hurting. But most of me was here, and most of me was in that place. I felt like I was really there, and it was all consuming. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. That's similar to an astral experience. So that's very similar to what you said you haven't had.
Because I didn't know that that's what it was, but it was the most amazing. I call it that it was my glimpse into the afterlife, right? Like this was a small little glimpse for me to see what it's going to be like when I get to rejoin my son and my loved ones in heaven. Because that's the other thing too, is since my son died, I have no fear anymore of dying. And I used to have extreme fear about dying, and now I have none. And especially after that experience in the meditation, which I'll start calling it an astral projection. If you, all of you who are experts in this field, you know, think that's what it was. But by far the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. And I have no fear about rejoining them permanently. When
Yeah, something that caught my attention also was he wanted to like show off that he was able to fly. I've noticed that they do that sometimes because not everyone seems to pick up the skill of flying. And so sometimes when you're projecting, if as a projector you're able to fly, everybody will clap like, yeah, you did it. So it seems like an ongoing thing on that side, like people learning how to fly. It seems to be more difficult than learning to swim. So when people can fly, people tend to be really proud of that. There was a story by one of our patrons, actually, Paula, who used to be on this group sometimes. And I'm going to highlight her story. I think I might have a small book coming out in the near future, but she was demonstrating her flying abilities with some people that she met astrally, and they were like, "Yeah, you're able to fly. Good for you." So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Oh,
I'll
that
toss
is,
it in there.
yeah, that's super interesting. And it doesn't surprise me. Brian was always an overachiever, seriously. He like nothing was good enough. He was always going to take it to the next level. So that would totally be in sync with his personality, that he would want to show off to me about that. And plus, there was meaning in that message of, what did he say? The movement. It's all like there's freedom in the movement. And I still don't even know if I fully grasped the meaning of what he meant by that. But and because it's also true with our grief journey, there's freedom from our grief in movement. And so I
Oh,
think,
do you think you could have meant movement as in like a movement happening where, like, for example, involved in afterlife stuff or being at the Helping Parents Heal conference? Like, you'll find
yeah.
freedom in the pro supernatural afterlife movement that's been happening.
Oh, I see. I never thought about that, but I think
Yeah,
that's
I like that.
as well.
All right, who else has a question? Anyone? Anyone else? There's a bunch of you guys here. Now's your chance. I wouldn't want to like end the interview and then no one, you wanted to ask something, but then you missed the opportunity. So,
I do. I'll go.
okay.
Um, so how often do you talk to your son? I mean, is it like a daily, everyday thing?
I talk to my son all day, every day.
Yeah.
It's just a regular part of my life now.
Okay.
He is. Can I tell you something? I'm probably closer to my son now than I was when he was alive. And we were close when he was alive, but our relationship is different now. We used to go head to head a lot, quite honestly. He just knew how to push my buttons, and I
Yeah.
loved that kid to death. But we don't have that now, right? He's still funny. He still has a personality. He's still a jokester, but he's just my buddy. He's with me all the time. I talk
Yeah,
to him all the time. Yeah.
that's beautiful. Do you help other parents learn to get in contact with their loved ones or no?
Well, thank you for asking. I
Yeah.
used to. I had a healing center here in Boise. I ran grief groups, which is how I became affiliated with Helping Parents Heal. I don't run those groups, but I'm what they call a caring listener, which means anybody who's grieving can call myself or any of the other caring listeners and just talk. And that's what we're there for, is to lend a caring ear, exactly what it sounds like. But I also am just getting ready to relaunch some workshops. I've been invited to present a workshop at an online conference about living after loss in December. So I'm just kind of fine tuning some workshops and deciding, how I want to present them going forward. So thank you for asking that.
That's so wonderful that you guys have such a good group, a group where someone can call and talk and, just talk to someone that actually understands how they're feeling. But yeah, I mean, we all want Sunday to have an experience so much. So that's why I was asking. So,
Oh, thank you, Keely.
yeah.
Sunday, I have the meditation that that was from that day, the actual meditation. Let's get together and I'll get it. Bring your computer. We'll get it on your computer or whatever, and see if it helps you. I mean, I don't know how or why that particular meditation triggered this experience for me, but it did, and I'm forever grateful for it. So I'd be happy to share that with you.
Oh, I appreciate it. I am open to absolutely everything.
Okay, you got it, girl.
All right, do we have any more questions for Paige before we wrap up here? Going once, going twice. Okay, I guess that's it then. Paige, thanks for coming out, and stay in touch. Let us know how things go. And I have one last question for you, which is, well, we know the book comes out on the 18th. I think this video will be up by then. It's available at the moment, pre-order on Amazon. I'll put the link in the description. Was there anything else you want to share with us, or anything else that you're up to that you want to let viewers know about?
Yeah, well, just real quickly, so the book launch is Friday night on the 18th, this coming week at 5:30 Mountain Time, which is 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time. And all you have to do is go to Facebook, find my personal page, Paige Lee, and click the little join. It's going to be a Facebook Live. It'll be 30 to 40 minutes. I'm giving away lots of copies of my book. I'm giving away t-shirts. I don't know if you guys noticed my t-shirt. I'm giving away a really amazing, beautiful sacred necklace that I've had made that will be the grand prize of the evening. And we're just gonna, it's the 12-year passing of my son's death. So it's the 12th year anniversary of his passing. And so that's why I picked that day. So that's Friday. Also, I just wanted to say thank you, Cyrus, for having me. It's really been a lot of fun. And I'm just grateful to talk with you.
Thank you, Paige. Yeah, I'm glad you were able to come out and talk. And it seems like the community of people who unfortunately lost their children, but it seems it's growing and growing, and that's really aiding in the discovery of the afterlife for other people. So it's always great. And I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and get going. I will say a special shout out to the patrons. It's a bunch of patrons, a bunch of people in this community. Some of the folks here tonight are suffering not only the wildfires in Oregon and California, causing breathing difficulty and health problems, but that's combined with what I've been going through, which is this post-COVID, I shouldn't have said that word because now YouTube's going to censor the video, the post-C virus fatigue and problems that's being coupled with the smoke and the fires. And so it's definitely concerning. So my thoughts are with everybody, including myself, because I'm in the same condition here in Los Angeles, also dealing with those similar health issues. So we all have to get through this together. And I recommend the prayer and meditation stuff for healing seems to be helping me more than the zillion supplements I'm taking. And so I do recommend to keep doing that and trying to communicate with your contacts and connections on that side for healing when it comes to protecting your lungs, protecting your body, and trying to stay healthy, because this is a very trying time right now for a lot of us. And I think it'll be recognized as that in a historical context as well. So I just wanted to mention that real quick, as well as for people watching on YouTube, if you're in the same situation as a lot of us are. That's it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get going now, but thanks for coming out, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and leave and make something to eat for breakfast, I think. So I will get going. If you guys are in the room, you're welcome to hang out and chat if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and pack up. But I'll see you all next time. Next meeting, of course, will be Wednesday, and I'll see you all then. So until next time.